Kevin Holland desperately needs to beat Mike Malot.
I fight because it's something that I choose to do. I love fighting.
All smiles for the crime-fighting, trash-talking, bright-shining Kevin Holland.
Kevin Trailblazer Holland!
Every win in the welterweight division I want everybody from 15 to 1. I want every dub. Every win's important to me.
The power that he possessed at 185 pounds, 100% carry over to 170. I'm very, very high on this young man at 170 pounds.
Malott vs. Holland are set for the co-main event of UFC Vancouver, and although Kevin Holland at one point had a lot of hype, at this point his career has been very up and down, and I think going into this fight versus Malott, Holland not only needs to beat him, but he needs to finish him as well. But quickly, before we get the video started, my name is JuicyMMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, as only 10% of you watching are actually subscribed. But also, if you want the inside scoop and extra breakdowns you won't see anywhere else, hit that join button, where members get best bets, members only videos, members only live streams, and even other fun perks like badges and emojis as well. But anyways, let's get into it. When you talk about Kevin Holland, it's one of the more frustrating careers in UFC history, because when you talk about his actual skill set and his actual intangibles, it's all there. He has a really good frame for 170 pounds, he has really good power, he has pretty good striking, he has pretty good jiu-jitsu, he has an amazing chin. There's so many intangibles alongside with some good skills that Kevin Holland has. But the problem with Kevin Holland is there's been multiple times throughout his career where he just didn't really care about winning all that much. As initially when Kevin came to the UFC, he was actually looking relatively good, and a lot of fans saw Kevin Holland as not only a guy who had potential in the UFC, but a potential champion. But after a little time has passed, and after it was pretty clear that Kevin Holland just wasn't all that serious about his MMA career, fans jumped off the bandwagon. But when you look at some of his performances somewhat recently, when he was able to go on a decent win streak and was able to look really good in a lot of his fights during that win streak, fans jumped right back on the bandwagon, including myself. I thought Kevin Holland at that point was taking his fighting career a lot more seriously, and I thought in turn he can start to live up to some of the potential that a lot of fans thought he may have early on. Now, did I think he would become a champion? No, but I did think he would become a legitimate contender at 170 pounds. But unfortunately, when you look at Holland's most recent performance against Daniel Rodriguez, all of that completely fell apart. As going into that fight, I thought it would be a relatively easy performance for Kevin Holland, but obviously it was anything but. Not only did Holland lose that fight, but he even got hurt significantly, and he was very close to getting finished. Now, the contrary to that is Kevin Holland actually almost got the finish at the very end, but nonetheless, that performance definitely was not a good one, and it definitely leads a lot of fans, including myself, to believe that Kevin Holland once again isn't really taking fighting seriously. And that all leads us into his next fight versus Mike Malot. As going into this fight, Mike isn't really perceived to be a fighter that's all that good. Yes, Malot at one point, similarly to Kevin Holland, had some success and had some promise, but at the end of the day, at this point, when you take a look at his career, it doesn't really seem like he's that great of a fighter. And going into this performance, if Holland wants to have any sort of legitimacy of being a potential contender, he desperately needs to beat Mike Malot. And not only does he need to beat him, but he also probably needs to finish him as well. So a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, do I think he can do that? Well, in my opinion, I definitely think the answer is yes, and actually, I think he probably should finish Mike Malot. As when you talk about Kevin's game stylistically compared to Mike Malot, I think he has a lot of advantages here. As on the feet, I do think Kevin is a more dangerous fighter than Mike Malot is, and also when you look at the way Mike Malot usually likes to strike out there, he likes to fight a slower paced fight at range. And at range, I think Holland actually would have a lot of advantages here, as because he is so much longer and so much lankier than Mike Malot, he can fight this fight at a range where he's able to hit his opponents, but his opponents aren't able to hit him. And essentially on the feet for Kevin, although it's not all that pretty, basically what he's trying to do is land one big shot. So if he lands a big right hand, a big left hook, or possibly even a big right hook cleanly on Mike Malot, I do think he'll be able to find a finish. And when you talk about Mike, I think there's going to be a lot of openings on the feet for him to get caught with a right hand or a potential left hook. So on the feet, I do think there are opportunities and openings for Kevin to land a big shot and find a finish. But even theoretically, if Holland wanted to fight this fight on the ground, I think he'll also have advantages there. Now, obviously his wrestling isn't amazing, but if he's able to hurt Malot on the feet, then go down to the ground and find a submission, I do do think that is a real possibility. When you talk about Holland's jiu-jitsu, it actually is pretty good. And when you look throughout the years, he's been able to submit not only guys that have lower level grappling ability, but also guys that have actually pretty high level grappling abilities. So if this fight does somehow find its way on the ground, I also think stylistically, it's a pretty good matchup for Kevin Holland to find a submission, or at the very least, find some nice ground and pound shots. So stylistically, as I said, either way, if it's on the feet or if it's on the ground, I do think there are advantages for Kevin Holland. But the one thing that I will say going into this fight, although stylistically I don't think it's a bad fight for Kevin, at the end of the day, we just never know which kind of Kevin Holland we're going to see out there. Because as I said before, going to a lot of his recent performances, Holland has actually looked really good and actually looked really focused. And when you watch him out there, he's been able to get a lot of finishes, and a lot of fans, including myself, thought he was back, thought we had the focused Kevin Holland back. But when you look at his most recent performance for Daniel Rodriguez, Holland just looked absolutely terrible. Not only did he get very close to getting finished, but also in general, he just didn't look really focused out there. And going into this fight versus Mike Malot, although I said earlier, I do think it is a really good stylistic matchup for him, we just never know how Kevin Holland is going to look out there. So overall, although I do think there's a good chance that Holland wins this fight, at the end of the day, we'll never know until the night of the fight. And that's kind of the frustration around Kevin Holland's name. But another question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, do I ever think Kevin Holland is going to become a legitimate contender? Well, to that, my answer is unfortunately no. Although Holland has looked pretty good in a lot of his performances, especially as of late, at the end of the day, he's just way too inconsistent. And even if he is on a 3-fight win streak, in that 4th fight, he'll look absolutely terrible and he'll look like he's not focused whatsoever. So based on the fact that I just don't feel like I can trust Kevin Holland consistently, and I don't think he's ever going to go on a 4, 5, or 6-fight win streak, I just don't ever think Kevin Holland is going to live up to that expectation, and I just don't think he'll ever become a legitimate contender, unfortunately. Does he have the skill and does he have the build to potentially get there? Yes, but because he's just so inconsistent, I don't think he's ever going to put it all together and actually get to that level and actually get to that point. But if he is able to beat Mike Malot here, he probably will be a little bit higher in the rankings, as currently he is number 15 at the welterweight division. But at this point, until I see any sort of sustained success from him, I'm going to see Kevin Holland as one of those fighters that just either end up at the bottom half of the rankings or at the top half of the unrankings. He's never going to get to a point where he's just a terrible fighter, but at the same time, I don't ever think he's going to get to a point where he's a legitimate contender. And when I say a legitimate contender, I'm talking about a guy that's top 8 or maybe even top 5 at the welterweight division. I never see Kevin Holland getting to that point based on his inconsistency, as I mentioned before. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this specific fight between Malott and Holland. And I will say, hopefully for Holland's sake, he's able to win and find a finish. But if he loses to Mike Malott, I don't think his future is going to be all that great, as at that point he would be on a 2-fight loss streak. At that point, he would have lost back-to-back fights that he probably should have won, and I guess we'll see what happens going forward from there if that sort of scenario actually does end up coming to fruition. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Kevin Holland is going to beat Mike Malott, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out, guys.